that much time, so I'd say I'll start. People will probably be joining, but we'll make good time. So yeah, welcome to Frack-Off LNG, to anybody who's here. It's very important for us to have people attending, so thanks for making it. And I'll start introducing myself. My name is Emanuela Ferrari. I'm part of a group called Future-Proof Clare. That is part of the coalition that the panellists here are also representing with their own organisations. And this coalition, the Stop Shannon LNG coalition, has been created to fight to oppose the importation of LNG into Ireland. I'm also a researcher on energy justice in Mayo University, so I can guarantee that this is an incredible energy injustice issue, and we'll find out why in a short moment. The way we'll organise this session, we don't have PowerPoints, it's really low tech. You just have to put up with our presentation, 7 minutes each, and then we'll open it to the floor for questions. So if you have any thoughts or any comments that you want to make, please do, because that's usually the most interesting part of these events. Just to say that in terms of the theme of the conference, Courage in Crisis, this is really where the courage lies in people like the ones represented here, who on a voluntary basis, just out of sheer motivation and passion, have been fighting a campaign to protect their communities, but also for the sake of people and the planet beyond, because this issue really has huge international ramifications on the future of everybody. But I'll start off just giving a few quick informations on LNG, because I don't know how familiar everybody in the room is with the issue. So just to lay the basis for the interventions of the panelists. So LNG stands for liquefied natural gas. That is methane. It's gas that is found in the earth and is fracked from the US in this particular instance. It's found everywhere on Earth, but in particular in this project, it's fracked gas from the United States. So it is touted as a transition gas, because, or as a transition fuel, because in comparison to other fossil fuels, it has relatively less emissions at burning stage. However, it's methane. So methane is one of the most powerful greenhouse gases on Earth. And if taken, so the leaks of methane in the atmosphere account for its huge impact in terms of emissions. And the scientific consensus is that it's 133% worse than coal. The process of obtaining this gas and using it is incredibly energy intensive, and it's also one of the most impactful on people and the environment. This is because fracking is a really, really high impact technology that uses huge machinery to drill deep into the crust of the earth, where the methane is lodged, and uses a cocktail of chemicals, some of the effects of some of which are not known. And it just has huge health impacts on the communities that are usually poor, marginalized in the United States, and who don't have a voice. And it just creates biological deserts in terms of environmental destruction. So this happens in a rich first world country. And then the amount of energy in order to liquefy it with very risky technology, ship it in huge tankers, and then regasify it is incredibly risky for explosions and energy intensive. So there's nothing sustainable or nothing low carbon about the whole process. So as we will learn very soon from the panelists here, who have been given basically their lives to fight the gas and fossil fuels, there's many grounds for opposition. And sometimes it's confusing, because you might all have heard in the news about different projects. So the campaign was born around a commercial project, which is the Shannon LNG project, proposed by US company New Fortress Energy in the Shannon Estuary in North Kerry, near Ballina. So this has been temporarily halted through a promise that the previous government had made of not letting imports of LNG into Ireland. But it's also now back on the table, so it's been remitted to Morelli, so that decision is probably going ahead. And then on the other side, the government is also supporting the construction of what it calls a state-led emergency reserve. And this is just kind of riding on the narrative of security, of the possibility of sabotage in the aftermath of the Russia-Ukraine war, and disruption of the Nord Stream pipeline. So riding on that narrative and using the narrative of security, it's trying to impose a different form of terminal, which, however, this campaign consider as bad. What we are opposing is the importation of LNG because it's a fossil fuel, it has huge environmental, social impacts, it's really destructive for the environment, and we don't believe we need it, as we'll explain. It's not for people, it's very much part of the US energy dominance project, according to which, because it has huge reserves of this gas, it wants to dominate the energy system worldwide through the selling of the trading of LNG as a fuel. And especially in the context of Ireland, we need this amount of energy. We already have enough gas, and we also are expanding on renewable, but we need this energy to feed the data center industry, which is the other side of the coin, and it requires staggering amount of energy. It's growing, there's no limits to it. So that's basically where the demand comes from. So it's a great opportunity today to hear the other side of the story, from the narrative that has been fed, I guess, through mainstream media, from our panelists, who have been accumulating research and evidence for years, and will present different angles. So I'll start with Thomas. So Thomas Morelli has been a climate activist since 2017 and a member of Extinction Rebellion Ireland since 2019. Extinction Rebellion, like many of you might know, is an organisation fighting for climate justice and climate action for years, and it's part of our coalition. He regards the threat of LNG into Ireland as one of the biggest environmental problems the country faces. Personally, he loves painting and drawing, and particularly likes creating artwork that highlights the climate crisis that you can find in our socials, and it's really good. I suggest you have a look. Okay, the floor is yours, Thomas.
Hello, thank you all for coming. I would like to begin by saying a few things about the climate crisis. It is a serious threat to the survival of billions of people. Like, it's not just disastrous weather events, it's things that those disastrous weather events will lead to, like diseases, famines, and wars over diminishing resources. And so, if it's not stopped, there may very well be no future for us. And there are people out there who are supporting the importation of liquefied natural gas, and they are saying that liquefied natural gas is a transition fuel, that it's a fuel that we can use when we're transitioning to a society that doesn't emit any greenhouse gases. And they say that burning LNG releases less greenhouse gases than what's burned when coal is, or than what's released when coal is burned. So they're, championing LNG as this fuel that's cleaner than coal. But this cunning claim makes me sick, because LNG is not really cleaner than coal when you properly look at the emissions from the overall usage of it. Because yes, burning LNG releases less greenhouse gases than what's released when coal is burnt. But there is emissions from cooling LNG, storing LNG, and transporting LNG. And as a result, a study has found that the emissions from using LNG are about 33% higher than that of coal. And what's worse is that that figure doesn't take into account the emissions of that LNG if it is fracked. And make no mistake, the Shannon LNG terminal that we are opposing would, beyond a shadow of doubt, be importing fracked gas, because the company behind this project, New Fortress Energy, they get all their gas from fracking. So I'd like to speak a bit about fracking, that it's a very dangerous way of extracting gas out of the ground. And as mentioned earlier, it does cause huge public health problems in the areas where it takes place. And it also causes methane gas to leak into the air, and that gas is not captured. So that adds to the emissions of the gas that's used as a fuel. And so that means that if Ireland becomes dependent on fracked gas, what's going to happen is that we're going to be using gas much worse than the gas and coal that we are currently using. It's going to be much worse for the climate. It's going to be a huge step in the wrong direction in a climate crisis. So this just cannot be afforded. And fracking has rightfully been banned in Ireland in a hard-won campaign. And so we should not be supporting fracking taking place elsewhere, which we definitely would be if this LNG terminal is built. Now, a few weeks ago, I was doing some outreach in Limerick, just talking to people about why the Shannon LNG terminal absolutely should not be built. And this guy raised a point. He said that if it's built, it'll ease the high cost of living. And, I tried saying this to him, but he was having none of it. That's not something I would accept, because it's going to make the electricity bills higher in two ways. Okay, firstly, New Fortress Energy have been awarded capacity contracts to supply the Irish electricity grid with energy worth 494 million euros. And what that's going to mean for us is that we're going to have to subsidise that contract through higher electricity bills. So we, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay for that 494 million capacity contract. And then the other way in which that this is going to make the cost of living worse is from the data centre that New Fortress Energy wants to build right next to the LNG terminal. Like, they have made it clear in their planning application that they want to build this great big data centre next to the Shannon LNG terminal and the power plant. And about 50% of the gas that they import is going to be used to power the electricity, or give the electricity to power this data center. And why that's significant here is that we also have to subsidize the data center use of electricity in our electricity bills. So with this great big data center built next to this LNG terminal, basically as a result of the LNG terminal being built, we're going to have to pay higher electricity bills to subsidize that data center. So this is not a solution to the cost of living. And I briefly touched on this earlier, that the climate crisis is a threat to public health. So obviously this LNG terminal being really bad for the climate is a threat to public health, but it's even a threat to public health in other ways, because, like I said, if this is built, this is definitely going to be importing fracked gas, and fracked gas contains radioactive material that can cause lung cancer. And also the gas power plant that is going to be built next to the LNG terminal, that's a direct threat to public health, even ignoring the public health effects of the climate crisis, because living near to a gas-fired power plant is linked to all sorts of health problems, such as renal disease, cardiovascular illness, adverse pregnancy outcomes, childhood cancer, and diabetes as well. So, for public health, for those who are vulnerable to the climate crisis, aka almost everybody, for people who are harmed by fracking. We just cannot afford to let this go ahead. And if I haven't convinced you that, well, maybe the two later speakers will. And even if they don't, there's some leaflets there that give some really detailed arguments as to why we really can't afford to let this go ahead. So feel free to take one, or even take multiple ones to give to people who you think might be interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. And yeah, there's a lot of information out there. Even if you look up the organisations that we all represent and the coalition website, there's a lot of information. That's no lack of it. So I'll pass it on now to Angela Deegan from Not Here, Not Anywhere. So Angela is originally from Dublin, but spent many years in the US, where she got involved in climate activism with San Diego 350 in 2011. After moving back to Ireland, she sought out climate activist groups and campaigns to get involved, and she ended up working from Not Here, Not Anywhere, which is one of the main campaigns in fighting fossil fuels in Ireland. It's a nationwide all-volunteer group, and it's opposing the development of new fossil fuel infrastructure and advocates for a just transition to renewable energy as well, both in Ireland and around the world.
Thank you, Emanuela. So yeah, I'm with Not Here, Not Anywhere, a nationwide grassroots group campaigning to end fossil fuel exploration and an end to any new fossil fuel infrastructure. There's a quote I go back to a lot by Antonio Guterres of the UN Secretary General. It's moral and economic madness to be investing in fossil fuels. So that's a go-to quote that I like. Because we are against fossil fuel infrastructure, of course we are completely against LNG terminals in any guise, whether they be private or state-led. State-led means there's going to be a private actor involved as well. So in the past we've had, I'll just quickly touch on some success we've had in the past. We were one of the groups campaigning for an end to offshore drilling for oil and gas, and we did see results with that, with the passage of the Climate Act in 2021, whereby with that act, new licenses to drill were banned, and we campaign actively against LNG terminals in Ireland, and we've been seeking a legislative ban on LNG infrastructure, and on the demand side of things, we have been campaigning for a moratorium on any new data centres. And some of the tools and tactics we use are submissions on planning applications for instance for gas plants or LNG terminals, and for data centres. We have had election campaign pledges where, for instance, in the local elections last year, local election candidates could sign pledges saying that they would raise a motion in their council or support a motion in their council saying that they were against LNG terminals, also a motion that they were against any new data centres and would fight them in their council areas. And then we also produce briefings on various issues, the issues that we campaign on, LNG and data centres for the most part. And we have copies of our briefings over there on the table, the orange ones. I don't see them now, but I'm sure they're there. Then we arrange meetings with electeds, and we have a petition, Keep Ireland LNG Free, which is addressed to our Taoiseach. So we have a campaign website that we set up, lngfree.ie, so if you go to that, you will see our petition, and please sign it if you haven't already. So I'm just going to give a little bit of sort of the background now of why we're getting really dangerously close now to LNG terminals becoming a reality in Ireland. For nearly 2 decades now, the fossil fuel industry has been scheming to get an LNG terminal established in Ireland. They seem to be getting more and more of the pieces in place to make this happen. So I think that's what's motivating the movement to get stronger at the moment. So just to go back as far back as 2009, the fossil fuel industry in the shape of Shannon LNG Limited, which is a subsidiary of US gas giant New Fortress Energy. They got planning approval for a gas pipeline that would connect an LNG terminal in County Kerry to Ireland's gas network. So that's one piece of the puzzle they got in place. In 2021, they finalised the purchase of over 600 acres in North Kerry, along the Shannon Estuary. Another piece of the puzzle there. 2023, they challenged in court the planning authority, so on board Panellists' refusal of permission to develop an LNG terminal, and they were successful in that challenge. So, as Emanuela mentioned, I think that case is now being considered by on board Panellists. Now, that would be for a private, completely private LNG terminal, privately run, so purely for profit. And then in March last year, they started talks with on board Panellists. Pre-consultation talks are called, about being the private partner in if a state-led terminal was to come about, that they could be the private partner. And then there was a series of big blows this year. In March this year, Shannon LNG Limited got planning permission for a gas-fired power plant at their site, which I understand would be the biggest in Ireland. And thankfully that's being challenged now by Friends of the Irish Environment, been challenged in court, so hopefully that will buy us some time and we'll defeat that. Another huge setback, the government also announced in March that they will be introducing legislation for a state-led LNG terminal for energy security. So I'm going to talk a little bit now, so that's kind of like how we got to this point and how it's getting really, really dangerously close to us getting an LNG terminal. So I'll just quickly interject here. If you take away nothing else, please contact your TDs, your senators, even your local councillors. Tell them how important this issue is to you. It's moral and economic madness to be building fossil fuel infrastructure in this climate crisis. So the energy security narrative, I would argue that it's false. An LNG terminal would end up being largely run as a profit-making concern, because even if it's state-led, state-led means there's a private partner, and they're not going to be in it just for the sake of the average person. They're going to be in it for the profits and liquefied now. So even if it was a state-led terminal, so ostensibly then it would be this big reserve, like there's an oil reserve. It would be a gas reserve that would be used, supposedly only if the Moffat pipelines, the gas pipelines that come from the UK to Ireland that bring gas, if those were to be, blown up by terrorists or whatever. But the fact is that LNG is not really suited to be for long-term storage. There's this phenomenon called boil-off. So as it sits in this floating storage tank, it evaporates and causes these huge pressures to build up, and those pressures have to be released. And how they would release that is they'd release it into our grid. So up to 6 times a year, they'd have to do that. So that's a huge volume. So it's not like the oil reserve where it just sits there. This reserve of natural gas, liquefied natural gas, would have to be put into our gas grid 6 times annually. So the real answers to energy security are demand reduction, demand management, shifting our energy usage to times a day when there's more renewables on the grid, and interconnectors, which there is progress being made on electrical interconnectors with other countries, so we can import electricity when the wind is blowing in their country or whatever, and it's not blowing here. And I'm at the 7 minutes. So let's see other main points I wanted to make. Sorry? Oh yeah, data centers, moving on to it. So AI is causing a huge surge in energy consumption by data centers, and we're at 21% of our electricity is being used by data centers. Now that was 2023, I'm sure it's higher today. And the European average is 3%, so we're at 21%. That's absolutely nuts. Ireland is required to have 80% of its electricity from renewables by 2030. we were only at 37% in 2024, and the problem is that the pace of renewable electricity development is lagging behind the rapid growth in data centre power consumption. And as Thomas mentioned, the Shannon LNG Limited aspires to build data centres on its site to power them from that gas-fired power plant. So anyway, hopefully you're seeing through all of this that really it's looking like this energy security is really for data centres and not for people in their homes to keep the lights on and keep the heating on. So thank you.
Thanks, Angela. That was very informative. And I'll pass it on now to Councillor Eddie Mitchell. Do you want to introduce yourself, or? You do. Okay. So Eddie has, quite recently been elected Councillor for North Leitrim, but he's also been a campaigner for many, many years with Love Leitrim. Since 1211, when the threat of fracking first reached Ireland. So around the Loch Allen gas basin. So Love Leitrim was instrumental with other grassroots groups to bring about the national ban on onshore fracking approved by the Parliament in 2017. So that's how close the threat of fracking is also to our home. It's like Eddie and Love Leitrim have also been crucial since then in the fight against bringing LNG and fossil fuels to Ireland.
Thanks, Emanuela. So I suppose I listen to people today talking about climate change and people's mental health, especially in relation to that, and how can we deal with what seems like an impossible task. And we have a sense of that in Leitrim because when fracking was proposed in 2011, it was supported by all government parties initially, and we were told that it was a deal that was done. It was just something that was going to happen. And the licenses, the option licenses were granted. In the north, they had full licenses, which lead to fracking. If the companies felt that there was a commercially viable project, they could move on through the process, and the policy was already in place. Or we were told all of that in the beginning. So we were really alarmed because we started talking to people in the United States, and we started to understand the impacts on animals initially, and then as time went on, then we could see the research coming in on the impacts on public health. So it took us 6 years, but once we found that, we started to challenge and started to fight back and build the kind of scale that we needed. We ended up with almost 22 groups, and we ended up leading a campaign in Ireland, and we ended up with a ban on fracking in Ireland on the Irish onshore. So it's illegal to pump a fluid into rocks on the Irish onshore for the purpose of extracting petroleum. So the ban that we got goes beyond fracking, what people consider conventional gas, and it really ran the oil and gas industry off part of the island of Ireland. Now there's a moratorium on fracking in the north, but yet we still, even after all of this time, still have to see a ban on fracking in Northern Ireland. So we understand that the threats still exist. So we understand what it's like to be facing a losing battle, and we understand what it takes to turn that around. And we've done that, we have achieved that, and we know what's involved. We witnessed the people in Rossport fight that battle that they had in the same way, and to be thrown under lorries and abused by the guards. And our win in Leitrim sort of came off the back of the work that they had done. So they built a foundation for us that allowed us to continue and build and fight. But so when fracking was banned in 2017, we understood at that stage, we understood the climate impacts. We started off trying to protect ourselves, but we became educated about climate. And we understood as well politically that when the government moved away from fracking, and Europe moved away from fracking, and the UK moved away from fracking, that was the trend at that time in Europe. The Americans, Donald Trump at the time, 2018, said, "We lend you our gas until you lose the fear of fracking." So we understood that that American gas coming into Europe was a temporary measure, because why would America give away its gas? You know, these aren't unlimited resources. But America was playing geostrategic politics, and they were concerned about money flows around the world. And they wanted to, when we were fracking, we were being told by the Irish government that we didn't want money moving to Saudi Arabia. We wanted, and now we're being told that we don't want money moving to Russia. But we're prepared to allow American frack-gas into Europe, which is going to bring us back to, like, the way the Americans are telling us now that we should have our own bombs and we should have our own weapons and our own army. How long before they'll tell us, well, why are we sending you our gas? And you can have your own gas, you know. But so in 2017 we understood the dangers, and we went to the people in Clare on the Shannon Estuary, people like Johnny McGilligan, Safety Before LNG, and we explained to them that their fight that they had fought since 2006 against an LNG terminal on safety grounds was part of the fight that we were involved in. And we said, you know, this is coming back to you, this isn't going away, this is going to try, now we're going to try and bring it into the Shannon Estuary. And we have been fighting since to try and address that. So what we were facing then, as we fought all those cases and we won and built the campaign. We built the campaign on the back of Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, that green movement that happened. They thankfully were glad to be associated with our campaigns, and they brought them forward. So we moved from a local community that was fighting against fracking to a much broader national campaign and global campaign fighting LNG and frack gas imports. And you know, the last government, the previous government, was formed on the back of a deal that was done with the environmental community and Ryan, that when the Greens went into government, that they would, as a red line, that they would stop LNG coming into Ireland. And they did that. In 2021, we got a ban on LNG terminals. And then we were betrayed in, because the 2030 policy was about accelerating the need for the process to bring in LNG into Ireland. And it's quite difficult for us to sit here knowing that, and I'm sure you'll get a chance to talk, you know, but that betrayal was so deep. Like, we understood your role in granting licenses for fracking in Ireland, and we spoke to you about that at the time, and we understood that, yeah, in America, not long before that, people thought that, you know, fracking and indigenous gas was the solution to climate action. But we know that frack gas is we know now that frack gas is like 33% worse than coal. Very important that John Sweeney is here to talk about emissions. Hopefully he can speak a little bit. But when fracking was banned in 2021, what the government said was that allowing LNG terminals or allowing frack gas in large quantities into Ireland wouldn't be in line with our climate objectives. Okay, so we have our Paris Agreement structures and our inventory, and we want to decouple our electricity generation from carbon emissions. But we also know that we have to look at global warming impact. So when we look at global warming impact, we look at all the emissions. We don't just look at the burning of gas. We look at in regards to, so if you think about our own gas in terms of global warming emissions, we've got gas from Clare, which will be quite low because it's close to us in terms of upstream emissions. And we've got gas coming in from Norway, which is coming through a series of pipelines down through the UK into Ireland. Relatively speaking, still quite low. But when you look at frack gas coming from the US, it's a completely different story. I think the numbers would be something like just over 200 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour of electricity, as opposed to 600 coming in from the US. So like that idea in 2021 that allowing large quantities of frack gas into Ireland wasn't in line with our climate objectives. That somehow just dissipated and disappeared. And when the war in Ukraine started, we started to have this conversation about energy security. And now it's okay. And this government has been very clear now that it's okay. It's okay to bring in frack gas. And I suppose our reaction now is we've been let down badly, really let down badly by what happened when the Greens went into government was we lost our environmental voice. So when the Greens went in, when we made that deal with Eamon, and you see in front of me, we didn't think that you'd be able to undo that deal. We didn't think that the Greens could be stronger than the environmental movement. And what happened was that Eamon, and he stood up at a conference and said that when he proposed the 2030 energy security package, which people need to read, very important, it's the basis of everything that's happening now. When he proposed that, he said he had the support of the Greens and NGOs in the environmental movement. And at that time, Jerry McAvilly from Friends of the Earth welcomed that. And that was so we did not get to speak. And what followed then, from 2023 until now, has been a series of distractions. And so we want to go past that, because the reality is that if we're divided, we actually can't fight the battles that we need to fight. Like Hannah Daly's, I'll just say one thing. So like Hannah, your work on data centres, really important, and very welcome to see that. I'd like us to go beyond that now and look at the global warming impacts of our policies, because we can't just focus. Like if we're only focusing on our own emissions within the state, that leaves the door open for things like frack gas. And we understood those things in the past, and now we seem to have lost that. And Eamon, I know you're going to probably speak, and I welcome that, but you were a minister. You could have changed that policy before you left. You could have removed your 2030 energy strategy, but you left it there for this government to pick up and run it. Like, we're really disappointed, and we feel very betrayed. And like, the amount of anger that I feel here, sitting here, I just find it very difficult to maintain that. But what happened, Eamon? Can you answer us? How could you allow false narratives to remove what we all worked so hard for?
Thanks, Eddie. And I guess that's the question in the room. How can we allow this happening in the middle of the climate crisis? Nothing of that makes sense for the development of data center industry. What is it giving to humanity? So I guess if Eamon Ryan wants to take it, and then leave some time for everybody else with questions.
Yeah, just a couple of points. And firstly, my kind of the data center one, because it is about demand, and I think, and in government we did call that out and say, no, you can't just build data centres without taking into account climate. You have to, if we're going to do data centres, they have to be renewable, storage, and not add to the problem. Eddie, I hear what you say. I have a different view, obviously. I don't think there was any betrayal. But I want to maybe focus, if I can, the response to what Angela said, because I think the question is, as you said, what do we do looking forward here? And how would you stop an LNG terminal going in?
We'll stop it by standing on the road if we have to. If anybody thinks that an LNG terminal is going to be built in Ireland, they completely misunderstand the environmental movement.
And as you're standing on the road, can I suggest this? Because Angela put one aspect, I think, of what that campaign is, or how you can win it. Because there is, and was, in recent years, a security issue around gas. Because someone blew up the Nord Stream pipe, and because someone else blew up the Baltic pipe, there is a real risk in our energy security if something similar happened to the two gas pipelines coming into Ireland. And if we were to ignore that completely, I'm not sure we'd win the argument, because people would say, the event of that, our hospitals close,
That's false.
Well, if I can just,
How much harder is it to blow a pipeline in the bottom of the ocean than it is to attack?
a single anchor
A storage unit.
could drag it. But the point I want to make, if I can, looking forward, and the argument against the LNG facility is actually, as she said, that we build instead electricity interconnection. But I would add to it, if I could, we need electricity storage, and we also need to have other backup power generation facilities, not run on gas, but run on oil or HVO instead. And if I can finish, if I just make
you were minister and you didn't do that.
We did exactly
No,
that.
you didn't.
We did it.
You didn't.
We are, can I assure you we did.
LNG terminal.
Last summer, having got the initial report, including, and this is very technical, but what was said there about the boil-off rate being 6 times you have to replace it. When we got that analysis in government, no, we did not.
You did nothing. We met the Greens.
If I just finish my point, you said a lot about what we did or didn't do. We commissioned SEPA to do further analysis. And in my mind, that we use currently about 6 gigawatts of power.
You moved
If
I
could just finish the point, the argument as you stand alone should be, in my mind, centred on this: that if we build the interconnection which is currently in development, we could have some 3.5 gigawatts of interconnection. I believe we could have some 2 gigawatts of storage. And if we had the likes of Tarbert and Moneypoint as backup power generation units, I believe we can provide the energy security our people do need without building an LNG facility. And that is why we in government introduced that along with a whole range of other measures. Now, this current government has not taken that decision. They seem to go in the opposite direction towards an LNG facility. To turn that round, I believe that argument for an alternative energy security approach is going to be the central one to win the day and not have an LNG facility.
I want to have to react because, like, we run an evidence-based campaign. We read the speeches that you made in the Dáil. We heard you welcome the strategy when the government changed their policy. It's like getting into government to stop LNG, overturning the policy to fast-track an LNG terminal for Ireland, knowing that it would introduce frack-gas, telling people it would be built and not used, and then to obfuscate your responsibility by handing it over to the next government, instead of making a decision when you had power. You should never be allowed to speak about LNG based on what you were in government, you were the minister. We put you there. You wouldn't have been there without the environmental movement, and you betrayed us, Emanuela. You betrayed us, and that is your legacy. Your legacy is to remain Shannon.
I wanted to kind of, I do find it incredulous as well, former Minister Ryan, that I just want to say it, Action 17. So you, under your time as Minister, a new policy was brought in November 2023. I know because I wrote the documents that were to send you a letter. We wrote an open letter to you about it, and we referenced November 2023, Article 17, and what the exact words are, because I remember writing it down. It was under an LNG terminal, under accelerated implementation. That came in November 2023 while you were the Minister. And I just wonder if you can just even acknowledge that to the room and just say, well, actually, I did do that. And I just try to understand why. Why did you do that? Why?
We've only a few minutes left as well, so maybe, I guess it's a rhetorical question more than anything, so maybe I'll leave it for a last question if there is in the room.
I live in West Kerry, so I'm not particularly well informed about what happens in North Kerry, but I have a number of friends who live in North Kerry, and they will say that the whole community is particularly divided amongst this issue, regarding this issue, because on one hand you have so-called short-term economic developments, and on one side, on the other side, you have the climatic potential for disaster, long-term for families. And I suppose it's trying to bring what you have from Leitrim to communities in North Kerry. Like Thomas, you're talking about the health issues there, the damage. And we're talking about individuals and communities all day and power of communities. And yet, individuals, we're not grasping that the economic development is driving forward at such a serious cost to our health and to our community. And it's fracturing our communities, this type of initiative. This is just about gas, but it's many types of corporate business development which is fracturing our communities because we all have our growing consumer demands and our cost of living needs and stuff. So it's that basic question, firstly, about how you bring communities together as opposed to dividing them around a common issue, and if there's anyone else who wants to add to it. Thanks.
So we faced this in Leitrim. We faced this in Leitrim, and despite me being very strong with Eamon, we didn't take that approach in Leitrim. We tried to, raise awareness, educate ourselves, and slowly. So what we had was 22 groups of people who went out on a daily basis into pubs, into community halls, giving presentations, and basically we educated ourselves. So there's a big responsibility. Like, remember, we were facing fracking. You're facing fracking happening somewhere else, but you live in a gas basin. So like, you're making a decision to allow fracking while sitting on potential yourselves, but it's harder for you to engage directly in the threat to you. We were facing the threat. So if you think about the threat that climate brings us all, so we're not able to see it the way we could see fracking. We understood because people came from communities in America who spoke our language, and they were able to talk about how they were being affected, and we could connect to that. So it's harder for people in the Shannon Estuary to grasp the importance of this. But that's why it has to be a national effort. And that's why I say it's really about the young people and about the solidarity with people that are fighting everywhere. And I think that when the young people, I'd love to hear a little bit about from Sean Sweeney. He might be comfortable now because I'm after fighting with Eamon. But this idea of upstream emissions that you talked about, Eamon, you put it into your policy. In 2021, you said that bringing large quantities of fracked gas wasn't in line with our climate objectives. Like, we have to go back to that point and fight for that information. Like, Hannah, your work on data centres, all this growth that's moving way ahead of our capacity to carry it with renewables. Like, we really have to think about our future. We just can't grow and grow and grow. We have to have a different conversation.
Thanks, Adi. I'm aware that we're out of time and the break is going, but I think it's an important issue. So I saw there was another couple of comments there, and if John Sweeney would like to intervene as well, maybe and then we'll finish. That's okay with everyone, and if you need to leave, please do.
Sorry, just a quick one. As somebody who's from North Kerry and is having these conversations with members of my community, I think a lot of it as well speaks to, and maybe just to touch on your point, Eamon, that if our backup then is Tarbert and Money Point, it's just another in a long history of the Shannon Estuary being a sacrifice zone for the energy needs of the nation, to be honest with you. People want jobs and investment in this region, but if we're being told that those are the only kinds of investments that we get, if it's an industrial, the zoning is industrial along the Shannon Estuary, and and continues to be, then I think that it's about sort of explaining or describing that there are other ways of investing in those parts of Ireland. Sorry, that was just when you mentioned Money Point and Tara, we were promised Money Point would be closed in 2025, and it's not. So.
It's about the lack of alternatives and imagination to a different system, different way to do things. Was there another comment? I'll take another one.
Just briefly, I think we have to distinguish between an emergency storage floating operation, which has its problems, of course, and a full-blown LNG terminal, which is designed to tie us into gas generation for electricity, tie us into fossil fuels for the next 25 years. And the reality is that, you know, if we actually achieve our national climate objectives, they will be infrastructure which is stranded. There is a problem over the financial security of the Fortress operation as well. But I think, you know, we have to be, I think, cautious. At the moment, energy security can be used in a variety of ways for excuses. We will learn on Wednesday, for example, that we're importing 14% of our electricity now from outside the country. Yeah, it's great for our emissions, but again, it's rendering us susceptible to energy insecurity in the electricity industry if we're importing from a foreign country as well. So I think, you know, the distinction is important, but either way, what is key here is the legal obligation to meet our carbon budget demands for 21 to 25, which we're nowhere near meeting, and 26 to 30, which we're in danger of not meeting very seriously as well. And the cost of that, 25 billion, the Fiscal Council say, that's going to far exceed the cost of any LNG terminal that we do. So I think, you know, the idea of stranded assets has to be first and foremost in any development here.
Thank you so much for giving that technical explanation. And I'd like to add that yes, it is a technical issue, but it's first and foremost a moral issue, as Angela was saying.
If I can just have a few minutes, because I suppose I sit here very inspired by the activism and the accomplishments made by the movement represented on the stage. And I also stand here, I suppose, I want to stand in support of what the Green Party did while in government, because I suppose all of the growth in data centre demand that happened over the past 4 or 5 years was from data centres that were already consented before the last government. So when the Green Party were in government, there was a ban on new connections that would exacerbate the electricity network problems, and there was no connections to the gas network for new data centres, rightly because that would mean economic growth based on fossil fuels rather than renewables. The problem that has happened since the new government is that with the finalisation of the energy security package and the decision to allow an FSRU, the government has also lifted the ban on commercially led LNG at the same time.
That happened in Emanuela.
That happened under the new government. That happened under the new government.
It happened under Emanuela.
It happened. It happened.
Just read the documents. 2030 security package.
But and at the same time, the energy regulator had been finalising a connection policy for large energy users, for which you mean data centres, to ensure that they grow without exacerbating the electricity security problem, and also fossil fuel use, which is gas lock-in. And they were anticipated to require that large energy users would come with additional renewables, battery storage backup and so on, so that they would not cause additional gas demand as they have been doing. But instead, the energy regulator, CRU, in its draft decision, decided that the Climate Act does not give them the legal remit to require emissions reductions from large energy users. And instead, they required that data centres build backup generation capacity on site to meet their demand. This is causing a huge amount of natural gas capacity planning in the pipeline, up to 8 gigawatts, when the Climate Action Plan said that we need 2 to sort of replace coal and to balance wind and solar. So if we're kind of forward-looking here, what is needed is to make sure that energy planning and decisions is based on zero carbon economic growth. And also that the state bodies, like the energy regulator, like Airgrade, like on Quilta and so on, are mandated to take our carbon budgets and our Climate Act into consideration in their legal mandates, because that's not happening under this government, and that's where I see the main concern going forward.
But Hannah, can I just say, both you and John Sweeney, who I have great respect for here, haven't addressed global warming impacts. You're both still talking within our commitments under the Paris Agreement. And I know that there's significant issues with reaching our targets there. But under a scenario where we don't talk about global warming impact, as we did under Eamon Ryan in 2021, we can bring in frack-gas and we won't have any more emissions associated with frack-gas from America than we would with gas coming from Power. And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to meet economic demands, to balance our economic demand as we try to grow our economy with products that are having massive emissions outside the state. So would one of you please address global warming impact? Like Bob Howard, in his research, he talks about global warming impacts. He doesn't, we try to decouple our emissions from electricity production. And we've been very successful in moving from something like 600 down to 200 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And now we're going right back up to 600 by using flat gas, and neither of you have spoken about that. Address that please, because that's important, because that's where policy is important. And that's why what's happening now, we're walking away from climate mitigation. We're back to focusing on our agreements under the Paris structure, and we're starting to say, yeah, we're going to try and meet commitments and reduce our the impacts from fines, but we're actually going to do anything that we can to continue to grow, even if it means bringing in frack gas from America, because there's no additional emissions associated with our inventory. And that's why we have to go and stand on the road. That's why, because if the government has walked away from its commitment to climate mitigation, then we need a radical movement that's actually going to stop everything until that changes.
And on that note, we might finish here, and on that note I'd like to just flag an initiative that the Stop Shannon Energy Coalition is working on, and it's a peace and climate justice camp that will take place in Dublin in June. If you want more detail, please get in touch with Dergla Richardson here, and also have a look at our website. And also, as Angela was saying, please urge your TDs and senators that represent you to oppose the importation of LNG into Ireland. There's also a judicial review that has been taken by Friends of the Irish Environment. Keep an eye on that against the commercial Shannon Energy project. So hopefully that will halt this project for a while. Okay, thank you everybody.